Hi, Eason here, and welcome back to Movie Friday, where I talk about movies that I might recommend that you watch for your Friday evenings, Saturday evenings, or just your weekend in general. On the Monday of this week, I covered Phaedra's 2020 debut album, Six Voices Inside, the title of which took inspiration from the 1975 controversial exorcism/negligent homicide case of Annalise Michel. Well, that particular case also serves as the inspiration for the 2005 Scott Derrickson feature, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Now, you may recognize the name Scott Derrickson from the not-so-well-made remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, as well as the horror movies Sinister and Deliver Us from Evil, as well as Doctor Strange. But The Exorcism of Emily Rose has kind of a special place in this director's filmography because it is his feature-length debut. The movie's plot is as follows. The Exorcism of Emily Rose concerns with the court case regarding the exorcism of the titular Emily Rose, played by the wonderful and talented Jennifer Carpenter, which has resulted in her death. And as a result of this, the priest who has performed this, Father Moore, played by Tom Wilkinson, is put on trial for negligent homicide. The prosecution side is manned by this legal shark known as Ethan Thomas, played by Scott Campbell, a Methodist and a believer and an absolute fucking beast in a courtroom. The defense, in turn, is handled by Erin Bruner, played by Laura Linney, who is a self-admitted agnostic. And very quickly, the court case becomes a battle of two ideas. One is that Emily was indeed possessed by demons and the exorcism was absolutely necessary, putting aside the fact that it has failed, or she has a diagnosed medical condition, epilepsy, which caused an incredible psychotic break, which wasn't helped by the exorcism rites, which resulted in her death. Now, before I start, I just would like to point out that there will be spoilers in this review, and this is sort of unavoidable because some of the things that I want to talk about pertain to some plot points, so consider yourselves warned, although I don't really think that you will lose anything if you are spoiled on this movie. You can still watch it and enjoy it. Pretty much the same. The movie flat out opens in the immediate aftermath of the botched exorcism and therefore Emily's death, and the rest of the movie plays out more on the court case rather than the possession and the attempted exorcism of Emily. In fact, I would say that the exorcism of Emily Rose plays out more as a non-plot point, mainly because you already know what the outcome of all that is when the movie starts. Now, given that the movie is more about the court case that followed the exorcism attempt, I would say that The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a horror movie trapped desperately inside the confines of a legal drama. Apropos of that, I think the perspective of the audience in this movie is that of the jury in the courtroom rather than the arguable protagonist, Erin Bruner, the defense lawyer played by Laura Linney. Now, the protagonist is the defense, therefore making the natural antagonist the prosecution, which would be the character of Ethan Thomas. Now, I think far as the director's intent goes, or at least that's how it feels to me, you're supposed to perceive of the prosecution side of Ethan Thomas, the legal fucking beast that he's rumored to be, as the villain of this story, because he is, after all, trying to get a priest who tried to save the soul of an innocent 19-year-old girl behind bars. But I can't really say that that ends up being the case, mainly because the way that the two sides of this court battle are portrayed. Ethan Thomas just comes across as this consummate professional who steps into the courtroom to do his job to the fullest extent that he is able, given the facts of the case. You can't really argue with that type of professionalism or ascribe villainy to it, mainly because this is his job. After all, of the two sides in that courtroom, he is the believer. He's a devout Methodist who knows the Bible inside and out. And if there is one person in that courtroom other than the priest who has an impetus to believe that an actual possession has taken place, it is Ethan Thomas, but he does not let this interfere interfere with him doing his job. Now, right then and there, the movie makes it very difficult for you to side with the defense as well, mainly because the defense lawyer, Aaron Bruner, comes across as this bumbling, really unprofessional, unprepared lawyer just stumbling across the case with all the grace of a very dizzy bull trying to navigate a maze-like china shop. Seriously, the defense side is presented as being extremely emotionally invested in the case to the point of gross unprofessionalism, which makes it very difficult to actually side with them. Now, this isn't helped by the fact that the priest, played by Tom Wilkinson, Father Moore, is not so much interested in whether or not he's gonna go to jail as he is with, as he says, telling Emily's story. Now, all this legal drama stuff with your typical objection, your honors, and sustains and overrules and defense calls, blah, 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 to the stands, are always intercut at the point of testimony with events that took place before the fateful exorcism, meaning they sag into the horror sections of this movie. Now, right then and there, two main problems of the movie appear. The first is that these two genres, legal drama and horror, really don't fit together, and the transitions between them are really abrupt and really badly done. There are some wasted opportunities, especially in the present-day horror segments, where Aaron Bruner has brief brushes with the dark forces that are hovering above the case, at least according to our somewhat stoic and decidedly paranoid priest. There are some opportunities there to transition, at least visually, from scenes of Aaron Bruner's distress to the courtroom that are so obvious that you just feel like screaming at the director, like, why the fuck didn't you use this? The other issue with this is the fact that the rhythm of horror and rhythm of legal drama are too vastly different to actually make sense. Horror is built on suspense and terror, and legal drama is built more on people arguing back and forth about the relative merits of ideas. Transitioning from Jennifer Carpenter wonderfully contorting her body to various shapes and screaming at the top of her lungs in German to some guy in a suit just sitting in a witness stand and relating the particulars of epileptic psychotic disorder to a jury is just too jarring a transition to actually viably go between. As a result of the movie not being able to juggle these disparate genres very well, the director also, I think unintentionally, introduces a skeptic slant into the movie. You see, if you are a member of the jury, then the thing that you have to decide by the end of the trial is whether or not you actually believe in the supernatural explanation or the various scientific explanations given. And you can tell not just by how the possession scenes are treated, but also by the present-day spooky shit going on, that the director intended for the actual truth to be the supernatural explanation. However, unintentionally and through the virtue of the extremely on-point prosecution, the movie instead slants towards the scientific explanation a lot more. This owes much to the fact that in the real-life court case, the prosecution won, and the two priests that were involved in the exorcism were both sentenced to 6 years in prison. As a result of going towards this conclusion, the prosecution is written to be completely on point and almost 100% believable, or at the very least extremely more believable than the defense's demon possession argument. As a result of this, the possession and exorcism of Emily Rose, the actual horror segment of the movie, comes across more as the impressions of the people who were there to witness it than the actual truth. Given that the case relies very heavily on witness witness testimony and you really don't have anything but what the movie is showing you, I think this is either a very, very intentional bout of realism at the heart of this movie or a completely unintentional one. Because if this movie is a horror movie, first a legal drama, second, which, judging by all the marketing around it, it is very much that, the horror part being real would have really helped, at least assuring the audience that the horror part was absolutely real, and all the doubters or fucking haters would have. This brings me to the second fundamental problem of this movie, the pacing. Now, as a result of the horror cutting into the legal drama and the legal drama cutting into the horror, none of these two central narrative elements are explored in and of themselves. By trying to be both, the movie sort of jumbles it a bit and manages to be neither in a very satisfying manner. This also owes to the fact that the horror segments are rather devoid of urgency, mainly because you already know how they turned out. Yes, there will be some twists and turns which you may not have anticipated, but ultimately you know what the entire horror narrative of the movie resulted in, because that is how the movie started. You were told that Emily Rose is dead. I would normally argue that knowing how something ends would not necessarily make the journey there any less fun, but in this case, it's really not the right type of narrative to fit this type of ending into. You see the battle between the forces of good and evil, the will of the pious priest and the 6 demons that now dwell within Emily, is far less urgent and far less engrossing when you know that at the end of it, Emily just fucking died. This could have been somewhat alleviated if the present day horror scenes, especially the things that happened to Erin Brunner in between the court dates, were handled with any sort of unexpected or surprising grace, but they're not. To start with, the movie makes it pretty explicit that the witching hour, 3 a.m., is when the spooky shit goes down. And what do you know? Almost every single horror scene starts with a clock showing 3 a.m. Now, when you do this, you are actively warning the audience, or just telling the audience, rather, that spooky shit is about to go down because it is time. Because of this, the audience pretty much expects something spooky to happen, which sort of undercuts the horror. When a character wakes up hearing a weird sort of sound, that in and of itself is mainly scary because of 2 things. One, usually the sound isn't something that the character is supposed to hear, especially within the confines of their home. And 2, such a sound suddenly emerging is, as I have just said, sudden, therefore unexpected. When you open the scene with the time of the spookies explicitly shown, I'm already expecting something spooky to happen, so I'm not really scared of what's gonna happen. Now, let's come to the best part of this movie. The best thing about the exorcism of Emily Rose is, bar none, the performance of Jennifer Carpenter. First off, she somehow manages to play Emily Rose with this innate little shyness and a bit of innocence about her. Most of that has to do with body language, how she carries herself, and it is also helped by the way that she dresses. But where Jennifer Carpenter exceptionally shines is during all the possession scenes. The most impressive thing about Jennifer Carpenter's performance, however, is undoubtedly the various difficult shapes that she contorts her body into during the possession scenes. One that sticks out to me especially is one where her friend is in her dorm room. He wakes up to find her all twisted up on the floor. There was a mannequin made for that particular scene, but instead of that, Jennifer Carpenter played it herself. The physical demands of the role of a girl possessed by 6 different demons, the 6th one being none other than Lucifer, the devil in the flesh, is monumental, and Jennifer Carpenter manages to deliver it sublimely. Despite the fact that shaky cam antics do a massive disservice to the performance put forward by this actress, the actual exorcism scene is chock full of moments where you can actually actually buy that she was possessed during the shoot. However, apart from Jennifer Carpenter, the rest of the cast just do a passable job. I mean, like, everybody else except for Emily Rose and I would say Ethan Thomas in court just stand out like NPCs in a game where those two are the only characters that actually count. With all that said, is The Exorcism of Emily Rose a bad movie? No, it's not. I mean, admittedly, it's not the greatest exorcism movie ever written or a great exorcism movie, period, but it is a good enough movie that you can still watch and have fun with. I first saw this movie when it came out in the theaters in 2005. I had to watch it again for the sake of this video, and I still found it to be a nice little movie. If you are a horror fan, you probably have seen this movie, but I'm going to add this. If you're not particularly a horror fan or if you are scared of horror movies, you might consider watching this movie as sort of a gateway into the heavier stuff. I mean, when I first saw it, I was so scared of horror movies that whenever someone even proposed that we go see one, I would say no. So I really don't remember why the fuck I went to this one knowing that it was going to be a horror movie. But I don't remember being particularly scared of it. Yes, the possession and exorcism scenes were scary enough, which is, like I said, it is a good enough movie, but they're not as scary as some of the other horror movies I've seen. So if you are looking for something lighter in terms of horror, you might want to give this one a try. For everybody else, I think this movie is worth watching based on it primarily being a rather well done, actually, court drama, and for Jennifer Carpenter's magnificent performance alone. For myself, though, I think I just figured out what I'm going to be covering next week for my Movie Friday segment, and newsflash, it's gonna involve a possession. Until next time, hope you have a wonderful weekend. It's Eason. Peace out.